Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. They just released an Invincible Season 2 bonus episode that's meant to be a prequel to Season 2, Episode 1. There's a whole bunch of backstory and Easter eggs that will be important for what happens during Season 2 and beyond, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. I'll do videos for all the Season 2 episodes this season. I only did the finale for Season 1. They also just released the Season 2 trailer. I already did a bigger video about that, so I'll add the link for that at the end of this and down in the description below. Careful for spoilers for that bonus episode if you haven't seen it yet. It's on Amazon right now, just like the normal episodes. They released it late last night when they released the Season 2 trailer. Like, surprise, we made an entire episode that you can watch right now.
You should have died at birth.
The episode is mostly meant to tell Adam Eve's origin story and give some more backstory and context on Omni-Man's relationship with Invincible, because Omni-Man continues to be a big character during the entire run of the Invincible series. He'll still be a very important character in the story right up until the very final episodes, whichever season that winds up being. They're already working on Season 3 right now. They haven't renewed it for Season 4 yet, but they will eventually. They could go beyond Season 5 if they want to. So just because he took off at the end of Season 1 doesn't mean he's completely gone from the story. He is back during Season 2. The other major reasons why they did this Adam-Eve story is both because it's a big spin-off in the comics, but more importantly, it provides a lot of context for why she does a lot of what she does later in the series, when she becomes an even bigger character, and both she and Invincible go through some super WTF things together as their relationship gets more and more complicated. They use her origin story and all the super messed up stuff that happened to her as a kid to provide more context for why she makes some of the really hard choices that she does later in the story, mostly with respect to her and Invincible's relationship. So not going to get too much into that because it's later in the story. But just in general, if you thought the Season 1 was messed up, that's only an appetizer. Things only get crazier and bigger later in the story. They barely even touch on that in the Season 2 trailer. Like, most of the trailer only covers what happens at the beginning of Season 2 with like a very brief teaser for things like Thaddeus, which is a little bit later in the story. What I'll do is I'll start with the Invincible Omni-Man stuff in the episode, since it was pretty brief, and then I'll talk about the Adam-Eve stuff. But the episode takes place over a few different time periods. It picks up with Omni-Man just as Invincible is getting ready to be born, because he and Adam-Eve are about the same age. During the Season 2 trailer, when they're doing their high school graduation at Reginald VelJohnson High School, Reginald VelJohnson in real life is voicing the principal, who is a version of himself in the Invincible universe that just became a principal. Alternate universe Carl Winslow just became a principal instead of being an actor. You see them all sitting there like Adam-Eve is sitting with the rest of their friends at their high school graduation, which Invincible is missing because he's out on missions. So while you're seeing her be born, Invincible is about to be born as well. The story picks up with the Lizard League, who you saw during Season 1, attacking the research and development arm of the Global Defense Agency, trying to steal advanced tech. If it wasn't clear, the lab where Adam-Eve and her brothers, quote-unquote, were created, the same place where Cecil works and shows all those things to Invincible at the end of Season 1. It was the same group that commissioned this experiment for the creation of Adam-Eve, even though at the time Cecil wasn't working there. He doesn't work there till much later in the timeline. The Lizard League were there for totally different reasons. They were just trying to steal random tech. They had no idea Adam-Eve existed. In Tatiana Maslany, who just played She-Hulk in the Marvel Universe, she's also played a bunch of other characters too, you probably remember, is the voice of the Lizard Queen. Her son is voiced by Jacob Tremblay. If you saw the crazy number of huge actors that they teased for Season 2 during the trailer, some of them show up during this prequel, meaning that they will come back in present day during Season 2. Phil Lamar here is playing Salamander, who's done a billion animated characters in different series. He's also played a lot of DC animated characters as well. Most of all the Invincible characters are meant to be parodies of DC characters, like the Guardians of the Globe are basically their version of the Justice League. Omni-Man is basically like a dark version of Superman. The Guardians wind up showing up. The reason their costumes are different is because this is happening about 18 years ago in the timeline. The team at that time had Black Samson on it. He winds up leaving the team after he loses his powers later, and then most of the team gets killed by Omni-Man during the events of Season 1, and they have to reform it with Black Samson coming back to the team. He's voiced by Kari Payton. There are many Walking Dead actors that play characters during this, like War Woman is played by Lauren Cohan, also from The Walking Dead, Maggie. Jeffrey Dean Morgan is probably going to wind up playing Thragg. Like, they teased that Jeffrey Dean Morgan is joining the series. I think that he's going to wind up being Thragg when he eventually shows up. So if you recognize a lot of Walking Dead actors, that's why it's Robert Kirkman, because Robert Kirkman created The Walking Dead. They reference a bunch of other characters that work with the Guardians that aren't there, like Darkwing, Martian Man, Red Rush, Dark Blood, who all show up during Season 1 and later in the story. They make a couple references to the concept that Omni-Man is a reservist, but he refuses to be on the team. Like there's some beef between Omni-Man and some of the members of the team, which is just them seeding the idea that eventually Omni-Man will kill them. He plans to kill them eventually. That was the reason why he never joined any of the other superhero teams, which he says later, is because he always knew that he would have to kill them, so he wanted to just keep them at arm's length as much as possible. But every once in a while he does show up to help out like he does at the beginning of this episode, just because he wants to keep up appearances so the world will think that he's a superhero, even though he's playing a long con. The joke about his original costume not being flashy enough for him is him changing from his original Viltrumite military suit that was just pure white. That's a standard military suit that they all wear. Changing into the special Omni-Man suit when he started calling himself Omni-Man, which was created by Art Rosenbaum that we saw in Season 1, played by Mark Hamill. The whole thing about not being iconic enough and walking around with a letter on your chest is meant to be both a Superman joke and a dig at the Immortal who has a large eye on his chest. You could also call that a joke about Image Comics, like the I for Image Comics, because Robert Kirkman was one of the major founders of Image Comics. We see the events of Adam Eve's birth. She was designed by the Global Defense Agency specifically to become the ultimate superweapon, being capable of manipulating subatomic matter at the molecular level. Her mother was just a random homeless woman that Arius Brandyworth found for their program, manipulating her amniotic fluid during her pregnancy to give her the powers. Some of you might recognize some similarities to Homelander's origin story on The Boys because it's fairly similar. When he was being born, they dosed his fetus with a ton of Compound V, and they both wind up killing their mothers because their mothers are totally normal and not capable of carrying superhero children. Technically, she doesn't wind up killing her mother though, as we find. Super messed up story there. Brandyworth winds up having to cut the child from her womb and spare her from a life growing up as a lab rat in the Global Defense Agency. They pass her off as the baby that another couple just lost who think that Adam Eve is their natural-born daughter, even though she eventually learns the truth. They show you her early life, how she starts to figure out how her powers work as she comes into them. She can manipulate subatomic matter in any way that she wants, both organic and inorganic. But during her early life, Brandyworth said that he created a subconscious mental block, preventing her from messing with organic matter. But it's just meant to be a mental thing. She can eventually overcome that. Eventually, she does come into the full extent of her powers a couple times throughout the series, but it takes extreme trauma in order for her to overcome that mental block. That happens briefly at the very end of this episode when Steven Erikson, played by the late Lance Reddick, R.I.P., killed her real mother in Brandyworth. Using the full extent of her powers, she manipulates organic matter of his body to wipe his memory and almost changes his entire body, but eventually she passes out, and when she comes to again, the mental block is back, so it's not a permanent thing. Later on in the story, we'll see something similar happen again where she goes through multiple traumatic events like when Conquest shows up and she can briefly overcome that mental block again. So she'll continue to get more and more powerful. Erikson is the main villain for this part of the story. He's just meant to be a project manager working for the Global Defense Agency at this time. But at this point, like I said, Cecil hasn't started to work there. Eventually, he winds up running the entire place and they continue to do kind of messed up stuff like this. And if you wonder, the reason why Omni-Man let them escape to the hospital with Adam Eve as she was being born is because he doesn't really care about Adam Eve. He just assumes that he's the most powerful person on the planet. There's nothing or no one that can challenge him, so he just lets a lot of stuff slide like this all the time. Remember, he's also trying to keep up appearances at this point, playing the long con, so he's pretty careful about the way that he acts in public. Later in the timeline, Brandyworth is replaced by Rogers, who continues the experiments, but without Brandyworth, they reveal they're not able to perfectly replicate the experiment, so they wind up with a bunch of failures. They reveal that they took Adam Eve's mother's body from the operating room and resuscitated as much as possible, but she was brain dead, to create more superpowered children, trying to replicate that original experiment. So when her brother calls them her family, that's meant to be literal. They are biologically all her brothers she winds up being forced to kill. And they're all kept in stasis tanks next to the barely alive body of her real mother. Super messed up, super WTF. This will all be important for Adam Eve's character development and her relationship with Invincible later in the timeline. Like, if you wonder why she's so reticent about having a relationship with Invincible, you just look at this episode and her backstory and you understand, like, oh, I get it. When she starts testing her powers and goes up against Kill Cannon, he returns later during Season 1. The burger restaurant where they eat later is the same burger place where Invincible winds up working just before his powers come in. They also feature it during the Season 2 teaser trailer where he was buying lunch for Alan the Alien. If you remember that season 2 teaser trailer they released a little while ago, there was actually a scene of the two of them much earlier in the timeline sitting next to present-day Invincible with Alan the Alien, so it was like they were teasing this episode dropping, even though these two scenes are just combined into the same scene, like they're happening in different parts of the timeline. This is sort of like the big belly burger of the Invincible universe. They also reveal that Brandyworth found Adam Eve's real mother homeless living behind the restaurant, which makes the fact that she's eating here now that much more messed up. Of course he lies to her about that part, like he doesn't tell her that her mother was a homeless person. Mostly to make her feel better about herself. She's already got enough problems, like he didn't want to lay the total truth on her, that her mother was just a random homeless person that they exploited. When she starts fighting and accidentally killing her brothers, Rogers and Erickson actually wanted that to happen. They were just using her brothers as cannon fodder to draw her out so that they could either capture her or force her to come back to the lab. You notice when she makes herself that armor, it's kind of Green Lantern inspired armor because we're talking about DC character parodies here. She's using similar powers like Green Lantern turns matter into physical constructs with this ring. She goes back to the Global Defense Agency lab, learns the truth about her mother, losing both her and Brandyworth, wipes Erickson's mind using her biological powers that she overcame the mental block to get. That ultimately winds up going back to her kind of abusive father and well-meaning but also kind of bad mother. She does keep the picture of her real family, which she transmutes, so like she has that in present day, but the idea is that the episode ends with her staying with those parents because for now, as she says in the episode, they're all she's got. Part of the idea, though, is that Invincible winds up becoming that family, like the family that you make for yourself winds up being more powerful than the family that you're kind of born into, even though technically she wasn't born into this family either. She was also adopted by them. Even though her entire story is super like she has this tragic backstory and super messed up stuff happens to her through season 2, season 3, season 4, and beyond, eventually there is a more hopeful ending for her character, so don't worry without getting into too many spoilers about that. But things are only going to get worse for her before they get better. The idea, though, is that she stays with those parents, and when season 1 picks up, she's been in high school for a little while. When we meet her during the events of season 1, when the regular episodes pick up, she's already been doing regular superhero work for a while, but she was still living with those same adoptive parents at the time, eventually leaving those parents permanently during the events of season 1. The reason this is all important for season 2 and beyond, season 3, season 4, like I said, the trauma she experienced as a child would happen in the lab with her real mother, her brothers, makes her super against ever having a family of her own. She doesn't want to have children for obvious reasons. So as her relationship with Invincible grows and they get closer, things get super complicated. Without getting too far ahead of the story, she makes some really, really hard choices later on. It gets super crazy. So no spoilers for that, but the comics are out there. If you want to read ahead in the comics, you can do that right now. The actual end of the episode is another Omni-Man tag scene. Remember, Invincible is the same age as Adam Eve, so he's about 12 years old in this scene here, joking that he'll never get his powers, but after his mother goes upstairs to rip the duct tape off of him, and that's gonna hurt. Briefly, you see Omni-Man flash rage on his face like he's right about to kill both of them, until he realizes that he loves his son, even though he's unsure if his mission will ultimately be a failure and he won't get his powers, meaning that he would have to start a completely different family and try again with another son. This is here because they want to remind you why he didn't kill Invincible at the end of season 1, because ultimately he loves him. Even though the story is mostly meant to follow the Invincible character, like his name is the name of the series, the entire story is also kind of like the redemption of Omni-Man. It's sort of like the Star Wars original trilogy where you see Darth Vader doing all these evil things, but then you learn about his tragic backstory, and eventually he winds up redeeming himself. Omni-Man eventually does turn good and try to help Mark take down Thragg and the Viltrumites, but that's much later in the story. We'll start to get into that during season 2, like you'll start to see his character turn. That's the main reason why he's back in season 2, but he's not a super big character again till later in the story. Overall, it was a great episode. If there are any other big Easter eggs or references that you spotted that I didn't mention in the video, just write them below in the comments. In my full season 2 episodes will start later this year when they premiere, but I'll do more bonus videos when we get more trailers for the series. Because we're in the middle of Comic-Con week, there'll be a bunch more trailers and things this weekend. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss those. I'll try to do videos for everything. Click here for that new Invincible Season 2 trailer, and click here for all my Comic-Con trailer videos. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.